The air in courtroom 4B was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet desperation. On one side sat Jeremy Park, a man whose net worth was a headline, his face a mask of bored indifference. Beside him, his mistress Brooke Holloway couldn't contain her smirk. Her victory was a living, breathing thing, perched on her perfectly glossed lips. She openly cradled a hand over her flat stomach, a silent, cruel promise to the woman opposite them. That woman was Camilla Davenport Park, Jeremy's wife. 8 months pregnant, she was the picture of a woman discarded. Her husband's lawyer had just called her claims the hysterical demands of a hormonal, soon-to-be ex-wife. The room expected tears. They expected her to break. But they didn't know Camilla. They didn't see the steel in her spine or the file folder resting beneath her hands. A folder that held a truth far more explosive than a simple affair, a secret that would not just end a marriage, but obliterate an empire. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, a sound that seemed to physically strike Camilla. Judge Margaret Wallace, a woman whose stern expression had been carved by decades of witnessing human fallibility, peered over her spectacles. "Mr. Harrington, you may proceed with the initial settlement offer." Robert Harrington rose a shark in a $4,000 suit. He was Jeremy's lead counsel, a man known for grinding opponents into dust and billing by the minute. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Park, is a man of considerable generosity. Despite the unfortunate circumstances and the emotional nature of Mrs. Davenport Park's claims, he is prepared to offer a one-time payment of $5 million, the deed to the Aspen condominium, and a monthly alimony of $25,000 for a period of 24 months. A murmur rippled through the public gallery, a mix of shock and envy. To them it was a fortune. To Camilla it was an insult spat in her face. $5 million was what Park Global Enterprises spent on a corporate retreat. The Aspen condo was where Jeremy had first taken Brooke. The alimony was a ticking clock designed to run out long before their child would even start grade school. Camilla's gaze drifted from her own lawyer, the calm and collected Audrey Klein, to the opposing table. Jeremy wouldn't look at her. His focus was on a spot on the wall just above the judge's head, as if this entire proceeding was a minor inconvenience, like a delayed flight. But Brooke was looking right at her. The mistress was a masterpiece of curated perfection. Her blonde hair fell in effortless waves. Her dress was a shade of crimson that screamed for attention, and on her left hand she wore a diamond ring so large it looked like a weapon. It was not an engagement ring. Jeremy was still married after all, but a promise ring, as the gossip columns had gleefully reported, a promise of the future that had been stolen from Camilla. Brooke's smirk widened, and she subtly shifted in her seat, one hand protectively, performatively on her abdomen. The message was clear. I'm next. I'm the new model. The real mother to the Park dynasty. Camilla felt the baby kick a sharp, insistent reminder of the life she carried, the life Jeremy was treating as a line item on a balance sheet. Her own hands, trembling slightly, rested on her swollen belly. She remembered the day she told him she was pregnant. He had been distant for months, a ghost in their 20,000-square-foot mansion. He'd smiled, a brief, fleeting twitch of his lips, and said, "That's wonderful, honey." Later that night, his private jet had flown to St. Bart's. A celebrity photographer, conveniently tipped off, had snapped photos of him and Brooke Holloway, an up-and-coming actress frolicking in the surf. The caption read, "Billionaire Jeremy Park finds true love." Her humiliation was public, deliberate, and brutal. He hadn't just cheated, he had erased her. Now in this cold, sterile courtroom, he was trying to buy her silence, to put a price tag on 8 years of her life, on the child she was about to bring into the world. Mrs. Davenport Park. Judge Wallace's voice cut through her thoughts. Do you and your counsel have a response to this offer? Audrey Klein stood slowly. She was the opposite of Harrington, understated precise her power, lying not in volume, but in substance. We do, Your Honor. We reject it, wholly and unequivocally. Harrington scoffed. On what grounds? This is an exceedingly generous offer for a childless marriage of 8 years. That is incorrect, Audrey said, her voice ringing with clarity. This is not a childless marriage. My client is 34 weeks pregnant with Mr. Park's child. An allegation my client does not dispute, Harrington countered smoothly, and the offer reflects his commitment to that child's future. Does it? Audrey Klein walked slowly towards the witness stand, her eyes locking onto Jeremy. Does it reflect the standard of living? Mr. Park's children are entitled to the private schooling, the trust funds, the security, the legacy. Mr. Park only has one child on the way. Harrington interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. It was the moment, the opening, the tiny crack in the dam of lies. Camilla looked at Audrey, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The steel in Camilla's spine solidified into granite. She felt no fear, only a cold, righteous anger. The room saw a heartbroken, pregnant wife. They had no idea she was a queen on the verge of a checkmate they couldn't even see. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Harrington, Audrey said, her voice dropping, drawing every person in the room into her orbit. That is precisely where this entire proceeding has gone wrong. We are not here to discuss the future of Jeremy Park's one unborn child. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was humming with tension. We are here to discuss the futures of all 3 of them. Brooke's smirk finally faltered. Jeremy's head snapped towards Audrey, his mask of indifference shattering, replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. The game had just changed. It had started 6 months ago, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A charge on a credit card statement. A florist. Le Fleur Boutique. Camilla didn't think much of it at first. Jeremy was always sending corporate gifts, but the charge was for a specific address, a penthouse apartment in the city's most exclusive new development, a building she had never been to. The note on the order, which she'd been able to coax out of the florist's friendly manager, with a story about a surprise for her husband, was simple. For my one and only, all my love, Jay. It wasn't for her. That single charge was the thread. When Camilla pulled it, Jeremy's meticulously woven world began to unravel. The late nights at the office became clandestine dinners. The business trips to Singapore and Dubai aligned perfectly with Brooke Holloway's Instagram posts from those same cities. The private investigator she hired, a grizzled ex-cop named Frank Miller, confirmed it all within a week. He delivered a manila envelope filled with grainy photos of Jeremy and Brooke kissing on a yacht, holding hands in a park, entering the penthouse apartment. The initial shock was a physical blow. It knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping in the sterile silence of her marble kitchen. She had loved him. She had believed in the life they built, the future they planned. The pregnancy, which had felt like the beautiful culmination of their love, was suddenly tainted a cruel joke played by the universe. For 2 weeks she mourned. She cried until her eyes were raw, and she ate nothing but ice cream. A cliché she couldn't escape. She felt the baby move inside her, and wept for the broken home it would be born into. But then something shifted. It happened on a Tuesday morning. She saw an article online, a fluff piece about Brooke Holloway's meteoric rise. In it, Brooke was quoted talking about her philosophy on life. "You have to be ruthless," she'd said with a dazzling smile. "You see what you want, and you take it. Hesitation is for the weak." The word struck Camilla like a slap. Weak. They saw her as weak. Jeremy with his insulting silence. Brooke with her public parade of affection. They were counting on her to crumble, to take the money and disappear quietly. In that moment, grief turned to resolve. She wasn't weak. She was a Davenport. Her grandfather had built a shipping empire from nothing. Her mother had run a major non-profit. Strength was in her blood. She would not be a footnote in Jeremy Park's biography. She called Frank Miller again. "I don't just want to know what he's doing now, Frank," she said, her voice steady. "I want to know everything. I want to know where every single dollar he's ever earned has gone. I want his entire life, from the day he was born until today, mapped out." "That's a tall order, Mrs. Park. That's digging deep." "I have the resources," she replied coolly. "And you have the time." The investigation moved beyond the affair and into the very foundation of Jeremy's life. Frank was good, better than she could have hoped. He started with Jeremy's past long before he met Camilla, before he was the Jeremy Park. He was born in Seattle to middle-class parents. He attended the University of Washington on a scholarship. He was brilliant, ambitious, driven. But there was a gap, a period of about 2 years after college that was a complete blank. He'd told Camilla he'd been finding himself backpacking through Europe. Frank's report suggested otherwise. There were no passport stamps, no travel records. Instead, he found a work history. A small, now-defunct tech startup in Portland, Oregon. It was there, digging into old employee records and tax filings, that Frank found the first anomaly. A payroll deduction for child support. It was a small amount, and it only lasted for a year before it stopped around the same time Jeremy moved to New York and founded the company that would become Park Global. The payment was made out to a woman named Sarah Jenkins. "Who is Sarah Jenkins?" Camilla had asked, her heart pounding. "That's the million-dollar question," Frank had replied, "or in your case, maybe the billion-dollar one. Finding her is my top priority." While Frank hunted for a ghost in Oregon, Camilla focused on the money. With the help of a forensic accountant, she began tracing the labyrinthine web of shell corporations and offshore accounts that made up Jeremy's empire. He was a master at hiding assets. Money flowed from New York to the Cayman Islands, through Switzerland, and into trusts with names like the Phoenix Fund and the Summit Trust. It was in the records of the Summit Trust that she found the second thread. It was disguised as a charitable foundation for underprivileged American youth. It made a handful of small public donations to legitimate charities to maintain its cover. But the vast majority of its annual disbursements, millions of dollars a year, went to a single recurring wire transfer. There was no recipient name, only an account number at a small credit union in Bend, Oregon, the same town where Frank Miller was currently searching for a ghost named Sarah Jenkins. Camilla felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was bigger than infidelity. This was a secret Jeremy had buried for nearly 2 decades, a secret he was paying millions to keep buried. A week later, Frank called. His voice was different, sober. "You need to sit down, Mrs. Park." "I'm sitting, Frank. What did you find?" "I found Sarah Jenkins. She's a second-grade teacher, lives in a small house, drives a 10-year-old car. Never married." He paused. "She wasn't alone, Camilla." Camilla held her breath. She has 2 kids. Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 17 years old. They're about to graduate high school. The world tilted on its axis. Camilla gripped the phone, her knuckles turning white. "And Jeremy," she whispered. "The kids have his eyes, Camilla," Frank said softly. "There's no mistaking it. They're his." Suddenly everything became clear. The hidden trust, the payments, the erased history. Jeremy Park, the self-made billionaire father of her unborn child, had another family. A secret family. Heirs he had hidden from the world, from his investors, from her. The pain was immense, a fresh wave of betrayal that dwarfed the first. But beneath it, a new feeling emerged, power. She held the truth. She held the bomb that could detonate his entire life. She instructed Frank to arrange a meeting with Sarah Jenkins, not as a threat, but as an ally. She booked a flight to Oregon under an assumed name. She met the woman her husband had discarded. Sarah was kind, weary, and fiercely protective of her children Leo and Lily. She told Camilla the whole story of a whirlwind romance, of promises of marriage, and of Jeremy's sudden, cold departure a week after she told him she was pregnant. The money had started arriving a year later, with a letter from a lawyer demanding her silence in exchange for financial support. She had agreed, wanting a stable life for her children, never imagining the scale of the world Jeremy had gone on to build. Camilla looked at the photos Sarah showed her. A boy with Jeremy's determined jaw, and a girl with his intelligent, piercing blue eyes. They were his. They were real, and they were her leverage, her ace in the hole. Looking at Audrey Klein in that courtroom, Camilla knew that the world was about to meet the Park heirs. The courtroom was a tomb of stunned silence. Harrington's face was a comical mask of disbelief, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at his client Jeremy, whose carefully constructed composure had crumbled into a mosaic of fury and fear. Judge Wallace leaned forward, her expression sharp and demanding. "Counselor." The judge's voice was like chipping ice. "Ms. Klein, I advise you to choose your next words with extreme prejudice. This is a court of law, not a theater for dramatic pronouncements. Substantiate your claim." "Of course, Your Honor," Audrey said, her demeanor unruffled. She walked back to her table and retrieved a thick binder. "Before we address the matter of Mr. Park's other children, I'd like to address the financial disclosures provided by the defendant. They are, to put it mildly, a work of fiction." Harrington found his voice. "Objection. My client has provided a full and transparent accounting of his assets. This is a baseless accusation, a tactic to slander my client and extort a larger settlement." "Is it?" Audrey opened the binder on the lectern. "Let's turn to page 57 of Mr. Park's submitted financials. A holding company named the Summit Trust, registered in the Cayman Islands. It's listed here as a philanthropic vehicle with an estimated value of $15 million dedicated to youth outreach programs. Is that correct, Mr. Harrington?" Harrington glanced at his own papers. "That is correct. It is a charitable trust irrelevant to the marital assets." "Irrelevant." Audrey's eyebrow arched. "Your Honor, we have subpoenaed the full transaction records for the Summit Trust for the past 10 years. It appears its philanthropic activities are curiously concentrated." She projected a document onto the large screen behind her. It was a bank statement filled with rows and columns of numbers. "For the past decade," Audrey continued, using a laser pointer to highlight a line, "the Summit Trust has made a quarterly wire transfer of $750,000. That's $3 million a year, $30 million over the last decade alone, all directed to a single account at the Bend Community Credit Union in Oregon. Jeremy Park went rigid. The color drained from his face. Brooke, sitting beside him, looked utterly confused, her brow furrowed. She glanced from the screen to Jeremy, a hint of unease creeping into her eyes. This wasn't part of the plan. The plan was a quick, clean divorce, a big check, and her ascension to the throne. This was messy, complicated. A single sustained youth outreach program, no doubt, Audrey said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps you could enlighten us, Mr. Harrington. What is the name of this remarkable, well-funded organization that has been the sole beneficiary of Mr. Park's offshore generosity for 10 years? Harrington was scrambling. He leaned over, whispering furiously to Jeremy, who shook his head, his jaw tight. Your Honor, my client's charitable donations are private. Ms. Klein is on a fishing expedition attempting to distract from the matter at hand. The matter at hand, Mr. Harrington, is the full extent of the marital assets and Mr. Park's financial obligations. Judge Wallace stated, her gaze fixed on the screen. And I, for one, am now very interested in this particular youth program. Ms. Klein, do you know the name of the recipient account holder? This was the moment of no return. Camilla's heart hammered against her ribs. She watched. Jeremy saw the cornered look in his eyes, the same look she'd seen in a news photo of him when a rival corporation had attempted a hostile takeover. He was a predator, but now he was the prey. We do, Your Honor, Audrey said clearly. The account is registered to a private citizen, a woman by the name of Ms. Sarah Jenkins. The name hung in the air, meaningless to everyone in the room, except for two people. Camilla saw a muscle twitch in Jeremy's cheek. He was a statue of controlled rage. Harrington tried to recover. And who is Sarah Jenkins? A director of a charity. A program administrator. Not quite, Audrey said, turning her gaze from the lawyer to Jeremy himself. She spoke to him directly now, her voice a piercing arrow. Isn't that right, Mr. Park? Sarah Jenkins isn't a program director. You know her, don't you? You worked with her at a company called Innovatech Solutions in Portland nearly 18 years ago. Jeremy's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his table. He said nothing, his silence a deafening confession. You knew her very well, in fact. Audrey pressed on, her voice relentless. So well that when you left Oregon to seek your fortune in New York, you left her behind. You also left behind the consequences of your relationship. Objection! Harrington roared, jumping to his feet. This is character assassination. It has no bearing on these proceedings. On the contrary, Your Honor. Audrey shot back, her voice rising with controlled power. It has every bearing, because the millions of dollars funneled through the Summit Trust were not charity. It was hush money. It was a secret, undeclared maintenance fund, a fund to support the children Mr. Park abandoned. The gallery erupted in gasps. The press reporters were typing furiously, their faces alight with the scandal of a lifetime. Brooke Holloway looked at Jeremy, her face a storm of confusion, betrayal, and dawning horror. The man who had promised her the world had a secret history, a secret life he had never mentioned. A life that came with children. Judge Wallace banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. When the room quieted, she fixed her steely gaze on Audrey Klein. Counselor, you have made an extraordinary allegation. You had better have more than bank statements and innuendo to back it up. Audrey smiled a thin, grim line. "As it happens, Your Honor, I do." She turned toward the courtroom doors. "The prosecution calls its first witness, Miss Sarah Jenkins." The heavy courtroom doors swung open, and a woman stepped through. She was the antithesis of everyone in the room. While Brooke was dressed in vibrant, attention-grabbing crimson, this woman wore a simple navy blue dress that looked like it came from a department store. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her face, though lined with the quiet worries of a single mother, held a profound, unshakable dignity. She clutched her handbag with both hands, her knuckles pale, but her steps were steady as she walked toward the witness stand. This was Sarah Jenkins, the ghost from Jeremy Park's past made flesh. Jeremy looked as if he had seen an apparition. All the blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. He stared at Sarah, the woman he had discarded like a rough draft, the woman he thought money had erased from his life forever. After Sarah was sworn in, Audrey Klein approached her with a gentle demeanor that stood in stark contrast to her sharp cross-examination style. "Ms. Jenkins," Audrey began, her voice soft, "could you please state your relationship to the defendant, Mr. Jeremy Park?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes flicking to Jeremy for a split second before settling on Audrey. "We were in a relationship," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "We met when we both worked at Innovatech in Portland. We were together for almost a year." "And what happened at the end of that year, Ms. Jenkins?" Sarah's hands tightened on her purse. I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. We had talked about a future together, about marriage. When I told him, he seemed happy at first. But a week later, he was gone. He told me he was moving to New York to start a new business. He said he would send for me once he was settled. "Did he ever send for you?" Audrey asked. "No," Sarah whispered. The word was a small, painful punctuation mark on a long-forgotten story. "He stopped answering my calls. A few months later, I received a letter from his lawyer. It said Jeremy would provide financial support on the condition that I never contact him or his family again, and that I never publicly identify him as the father. You were pregnant with his child, and he sent a lawyer to silence you." "Yes." Harrington stood up. "Objection. This is ancient history. My client made arrangements to provide for his child. He was a young man trying to start a business. He did what he thought was best." "What he thought was best for himself," Audrey countered, not missing a beat. "Overruled," Judge Wallace said, her eyes glued to Sarah. "Continue, Ms. Klein." "Ms. Jenkins," Audrey said, "Mr. Harrington stated that his client provided for his child, singular. Is that accurate?" Sarah looked down at her hands, a flicker of pain crossing her face before it was replaced by a fierce maternal pride. "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "That's not accurate. I was pregnant with twins." Another wave of shock rippled through the courtroom. Brooke Holloway let out a small, involuntary gasp. Twins. Not one forgotten child, but two. The scale of the deception was growing exponentially. "Twins," Audrey repeated, letting the word sink in. "And did Mr. Park know you were expecting twins?" "Yes. I told him after my first ultrasound, just before he left." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had known. He had known, and still he had vanished. "And for the last 17 years, you have raised these children by yourself." "Yes. They are my entire world." "The payments from the Summit Trust," Audrey continued. "That money was the child support Mr. Park paid you, correct?" "Yes. It arrived every 3 months, like clockwork. The lawyer told me it was all contingent on my complete and total silence." "So you upheld your end of the bargain," Audrey stated. For 17 years you kept his secret. You raised his children in anonymity while he became one of the most famous billionaires in the world. You never spoke to the press. You never contacted him. Why? Why did you keep silent for so long? Sarah finally looked at Jeremy. Her gaze wasn't filled with hatred, but with a deep, bottomless well of disappointment. For them, she said simply, for Leo and Lily. I didn't want them to grow up in a circus. I didn't want them to be defined by a father who didn't want them. I wanted them to have a normal, happy life. The money helped me give them that. Stability, good schools, a safe home. It was never about me. So why speak now, Ms. Jenkins? What has changed? Audrey asked the crucial question. Sarah turned her attention back to Audrey, and then for a moment her eyes met Camilla's across the courtroom. A flicker of understanding, of solidarity, passed between the two women, the wife he was discarding and the woman he had thrown away. I was contacted by Mrs. Davenport Park's legal team, Sarah said, and I saw the news. I saw him with a new woman while his wife was pregnant, and I saw him trying to deny his own child the same way he denied mine. I realized my silence wasn't protecting my children anymore. It was enabling him. It was allowing him to hurt another woman, another child. My children are almost adults now. They deserve to know who their father is, and more importantly, he needs to finally publicly acknowledge that they exist. The moral weight of her testimony settled over the room. She hadn't come for money or revenge. She had come for justice, for recognition. She had come to stop a cycle of selfish cruelty. Harrington saw his case crumbling. He had to discredit her. He rose for cross-examination, his face a sneer. Miss Jenkins, you've lived quite comfortably on my client's money for 17 years, haven't you? $3 million a year is a lavish lifestyle for a school teacher in Oregon. The money was never for me, Sarah replied, calmly, unintimidated. It was put into a trust for the children, for their education, their health care, their future. I live on my teacher's salary. I've saved every penny for them. How convenient, Harrington scoffed. And isn't it also convenient that you've appeared now during a high-profile divorce, teaming up with the jilted wife to extort an even bigger payday? Objection, Audrey called out. But Sarah answered before the judge could rule. I have never met Mrs. Davenport Park before last month, she said, her voice unwavering. And I am not here for a payday. I am here to tell the truth. Your client has 2 children, 2 wonderful, intelligent 17-year-old children who deserve to be acknowledged. Harrington paced before her. You claim these are my client's children. Where is the proof you have a birth certificate? Of course, Sarah said, but the father's name is listed as unknown. That was part of the agreement. So you have no concrete proof, Harrington declared triumphantly, turning to the judge. Your Honor, this is a baseless claim from a woman trying to cash in. Audrey Klein remained perfectly still. Proof is not an issue, Your Honor, she said into the charged silence. We have already filed a motion to compel a DNA test, which I am certain will confirm paternity. She paused, then turned toward the back of the courtroom. But I believe we have a more immediate visual form of evidence. She raised her voice slightly. Ms. Jenkins, are your children here today? Sarah's gaze followed Audrey's to the courtroom doors. Yes, she said, her voice filled with a mother's love and fear. They are. Your Honor, Audrey announced, her voice resonating with theatrical power. I present to the court Leo and Lily Jenkins Park. On Audrey Klein's cue, the courtroom doors opened for a second time. Every head, including Judge Wallace's, swiveled to face the entrance. The reporters in the gallery craned their necks, cameras clicking, despite the bailiff's warnings. Two figures stood silhouetted in the doorway. As they stepped into the light of the courtroom, a collective gasp swept through the room. They were teenagers, a boy and a girl, both tall and poised with an air of quiet confidence that belied their age. But it wasn't their youth that was so shocking. It was their faces. The boy Leo had Jeremy Park's exact jawline and his dark, intense hair. He possessed the same focused, piercing blue eyes that had graced the covers of countless business magazines. His expression was a mixture of anxiety and grim determination. The girl Lily was a softer echo, but the resemblance was no less startling. She had the same high cheekbones and the same intelligent set to her eyes, a mirror of her father in his university photos. Her posture was ramrod straight, a silent defiance against the man who was staring at them, as if he'd seen his own ghost. They walked down the central aisle, their mother Sarah watching them from the witness stand with tears welling in her eyes. They didn't look at the lawyers, the judge, or the gawking crowd. Their eyes were fixed on one person, Jeremy Park. The scene was devastatingly cinematic. Jeremy, the titan of industry, the man who controlled markets with a single phone call, was rendered utterly powerless. He was frozen, a statue, carved from shock. The carefully constructed walls of his life were not just cracking. They were being pulverized into dust before his very eyes. Brooke Holloway let out a small, strangled sound. She stared at the teenagers, then at Jeremy's ashen face, then back again. The future she had envisioned, a life of luxury as Mrs. Park, mother to the sole heir, evaporated. She was not the successor to the Queen. She was just another woman in a line of women Jeremy had used and deceived. And these teenagers, they were not just a complication. They were a claim. A legitimate, living, breathing claim on the man, the name, and the fortune she had so ruthlessly pursued. Her smirk, the one she had worn like armor all morning, was gone, replaced by a mask of raw, unfiltered panic. Harrington, for the first time in his storied career, was speechless. His objections, his legal maneuvering, all seemed absurd in the face of this undeniable visual truth. How could he argue against paternity when Jeremy Park's own face, 25 years younger, was staring back at him from two different people? Leo and Lily stopped at the front of the courtroom, standing behind the prosecution's table, a silent show of solidarity with Audrey and Camilla. They didn't look angry. They looked resolved, as if they had spent their whole lives preparing for this moment. Camilla watched them, and her heart, which had been a knot of anger and pain, felt a surprising pang of empathy. These were not props in her legal strategy. They were children. Children who had grown up with a hole in their lives, shaped exactly like the man sitting across the room. Her fight was no longer just for herself and her unborn baby. It was for them, too. For the years of birthdays, he missed the school plays. He never attended the fatherly advice he never gave. Judge Wallace, recovering from her own shock, banged the gavel. Order. Order. Her voice was strained. She looked at the two teenagers, then at Jeremy, and her expression hardened. The law was the law, but this was a matter of fundamental human decency, and she was witnessing a profound failure of it. Mr. Park, the judge said, her voice low and dangerous. Would you care to comment on this development? Jeremy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Sarah, the woman he had paid to disappear. He looked at Leo and Lily, the children he had treated as a financial liability. He looked at Camilla, his pregnant wife, whose quiet strength had orchestrated this entire public demolition of his life. He was surrounded, trapped by the consequences of his own choices. Audrey Klein let the silence hang for a full minute, allowing the impact of the children's presence to saturate the room. Then she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm, but ringing with finality. "The defense has claimed that Mr. Park's offer is generous. We now see it for what it is. It is an attempt to silence yet another woman and discard yet another child. It is a pattern of behavior. Mr. Park does not build families. He acquires them and disposes of them when they become inconvenient." She gestured towards Leo and Lily. "These are his first heirs. My client, Camilla Davenport Park, carries his third. The initial settlement offer is not just rejected, it is an offense. We will be submitting a revised claim that accounts for all of Mr. Park's obligations, past, present, and future. We will be seeking a settlement that provides security not just for Mrs. Davenport Park and her child, but one that rectifies 17 years of negligence and abandonment towards his other children." Harrington finally stammered. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We need time, a recess to process this new information." "A recess?" Judge Wallace's voice was laced with contempt. "Mr. Harrington, it seems your client has had 17 years to process this information. A recess is granted. This court will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. "And Mr. Park," she said, her eyes boring into him, "I suggest you get your house in order, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a Category 5 hurricane has just made landfall." As the judge swept from the room, chaos erupted. Jeremy sat paralyzed as reporters shouted his name. Leo and Lily stood their ground, a silent, powerful indictment. Camilla rose slowly, her hand on her belly. She didn't look at Jeremy. Her gaze was on Leo and Lily. She gave them a small, sad smile, a look of acknowledgement. In that moment, they were not rivals for a fortune. They were siblings, all of them. The boy in the court, the girl by his side, and the baby in her womb, bound together by the same man's profound and devastating selfishness. The smirk was gone from the mistress's face, replaced by the terror of a woman realizing she'd bet everything on a man who was a king of lies. The battle was far from over, but the war had just been won. The recess felt like a detonation. Jeremy Park was swarmed by his legal and PR teams, who formed a human shield to hustle him into a private conference room. The look on his face was no longer shock. It was the cold, calculating fury of a cornered predator. In the hallway, Brooke Holloway confronted him, her voice a sharp, hysterical whisper. "Twins. 17-year-old. Twins, Jeremy. You told me you had no baggage. You told me she was a bitter, childless woman you were trying to get rid of." "Keep your voice down," he snarled, grabbing her arm. "This is a setup, a shakedown. They're trying to ruin me." "They are ruining you," she hissed back, yanking her arm away. "And what about me? What about us? You promised me a future. Was that a lie, too? Was I just another secret you were planning to pay off and bury?" The question hung in the air, poisoned with dawning realization. She saw the answer in his eyes. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. The disdain on his face was enough. To him, she was an asset that had just become a liability. Her purpose to be the beautiful, fertile young replacement for his aging wife was now null and void. He already had heirs. He didn't need a new one from her. "Get in the car and go back to the penthouse," he commanded, his voice devoid of any affection. Don't talk to anyone, especially not the press." He turned his back on her and disappeared into the conference room, leaving her standing alone in the whirlwind of his imploding life. The promise ring on her finger suddenly felt cold and heavy, a shackle rather than a prize. Meanwhile, in another much calmer room, Camilla met her stepchildren for the first time. Audrey Klein and Sarah Jenkins stood by, giving them space. "I'm Camilla," she said softly to Leo and Lily. "I'm so sorry you had to do that. It wasn't fair to put you on display." Leo, his jaw tight, shook his head. "It's okay," Mom explained. "We knew it was the only way he would ever have to look at us." "He never once tried to see you?" Camilla asked, the injustice of it, a fresh wound. Lily spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "No. We wrote him letters when we were younger. We found his office address online. We never knew if he got them. He never wrote back." The simple cruelty of it stole Camilla's breath. This wasn't just negligence. It was a deliberate, sustained act of erasure. The meeting was brief, a quiet acknowledgement of their strange new reality. As they were leaving, Sarah Jenkins pulled Camilla aside. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it was humbling. "You didn't have to include them. This could have just been about you. You gave my children a voice." "He wronged all of us, Sarah," Camilla replied, placing a hand on the other woman's arm. "His debt is to all of us." That evening, as the news of the Park secret heirs dominated every media outlet, sending Park Global's stock into a nosedive, Camilla received an unexpected visitor at her lawyer's office. It was Brooke Holloway. She looked nothing like the smug, confident woman from the courtroom. Her makeup was streaked with tears. Her crimson dress looked garish under the fluorescent office lights, and the giant ring was gone from her finger. She looked desperate, stripped of her power. "What do you want?" Audrey asked, her tone glacial. "I want to help you," Brooke said, her voice trembling. "He's going to run." Camilla and Audrey exchanged a look of skepticism. "Why would you help us?" Camilla asked. "This morning you were smirking at me from across the courtroom." "This morning I thought I had a future." Brooke shot back, a flash of her old fire returning. "Now I know I was just a placeholder. He used me to humiliate you. And now that this is all out, I'm disposable. He told me so himself." She took a shuddering breath. "He's not just going to fight you in court. He's liquidating. He's moving assets, real untraceable assets, to a non-extradition country. He has a jet fueled and waiting. He's planning on leaving you his unborn child and his new children with a mountain of corporate debt and hollowed-out shell companies." This was the second twist, the one they hadn't seen coming. Jeremy wasn't going to fight. He was going to flee. A scorched earth policy. If he couldn't have it all, he would burn it all to the ground, so no one else could have it either. "Why are you telling us this?" Audrey pressed her lawyerly suspicion on high alert. "What's in it for you? A deal." Brooke set her eyes hard. "And revenge. I want to see his face when he realizes I'm the one who took him down. He thinks I'm a stupid actress he can throw away. He's about to find out how wrong he is." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. "This is everything. For the past 6 months I've had access to his personal laptop, his study. I wasn't just his mistress. He was grooming me to be the new corporate wife. He showed me things trying to impress me. I made copies. Offshore account numbers not on any official disclosure transfer authorizations. He pre-signed the flight plan for his escape route correspondence with his offshore bankers. It's all there." She slid the flash drive across the table. It was the key to his entire, hidden financial kingdom. "I want a settlement," Brooke stated. "A small one, enough to disappear and start over. And I want full immunity from any potential fraud charges. In exchange, I'll testify. I will tell the court under oath that he is a flight risk and is actively hiding assets with the intent to defraud his family and the court." Camilla looked at the flash drive, then at the woman in front of her. She did not like Brooke Holloway. She might never forgive her for the humiliation, for the pain, but she recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look of a woman who had been used, underestimated, and discarded. It was a look she now knew well. The two women Jeremy had pitted against each other, the wife and the mistress, had become the most unlikely and most dangerous of allies. "Give her the deal, Audrey," Camilla said, her voice firm. "Let's end this." The next morning, courtroom 4B was a tinderbox of anticipation. The press gallery was overflowing. Jeremy Park arrived looking haggard but defiant, flanked by a grim-faced Robert Harrington. He clearly believed this was just another business negotiation, a problem to be solved with money and intimidation. He had no idea he was walking into a perfectly laid trap. As soon as Judge Wallace took her seat, Audrey Klein stood. "Your Honor, we have a new motion to file effective immediately. We have credible evidence that the defendant, Mr. Park, is a significant flight risk and is actively engaged in the process of concealing and transferring marital assets overseas with the intent of evading the jurisdiction of this court." Harrington jumped up. "Objection! This is outrageous slander of the highest order." "Is it, Mr. Harrington?" Audrey's voice was cold as steel. "Or is it the truth?" The prosecution calls Brooke Holloway to the stand. If the appearance of the twins had been a shockwave, this was a nuclear explosion. Jeremy's head whipped around his face, contorting in a mask of pure disbelief and rage, as he saw Brooke, dressed in a conservative grey suit, walk calmly to the witness stand. The look he gave her was murderous. She met it with a calm, icy stare. Brooke's testimony was devastating. Guided by Audrey, she calmly and methodically laid out Jeremy's entire plan. She presented the documents from the flash drive emails to Swiss bankers' instructions for liquidating portfolios, the finalized flight plan for a private jet bound for the United Arab Emirates, scheduled to depart that very night. Each piece of evidence was a nail in Jeremy's coffin. Harrington's cross-examination was feeble. He tried to paint Brooke as a scorned lover, seeking revenge. But her evidence was too precise, too damning. The pre-signed transfer authorizations authenticated by a handwriting expert overnight were irrefutable proof. By the time Brooke stepped down, Jeremy Park's fate was sealed. Judge Wallace's face was thunderous. "Mr. Park, do you have anything to say in response to this testimony?" "To these documents." Jeremy stood his expensive suit, seeming to hang off him. "It's all lies," he snarled, his voice cracking. "She's a vindictive, gold-digging—" "That is enough!" The judge's voice boomed, silencing him instantly. "I have seen and heard enough." She made her ruling on the spot. "Effective immediately, I am signing a court order to freeze every known asset of Mr. Jeremy Park and Park Global Enterprises, both domestic and international. The defendant is to surrender his passport to the bailiff at this moment. You are not to leave the state of New York without the express permission of this court." The sound of Jeremy's empire grinding to a halt was a deafening silence. The game was over. He had lost. The final settlement, arbitrated over the following weeks, was a complete capitulation. The judge, incensed by Jeremy's deceit, made an example of him. 40% of his total verified assets were placed into a trust for Camilla and her unborn child, a daughter she would later name Grace. An equal 40% was placed into a separate, irrevocable trust for Leo and Lily to be managed by their mother, Sarah Jenkins. This amount not only secured their futures, but served as retroactive compensation for 17 years of paternal abandonment. Brooke Holloway received a one-time sealed settlement of $5 million. Ironically, the same amount Jeremy had first offered Camilla, and quietly disappeared from the public eye. The remaining 20%, along with the crumbling remains of his debt-ridden company, were left to Jeremy. He was a billionaire, reduced to a mere multi-millionaire, a king dethroned and disgraced his name forever, synonymous with scandal. A month later, in a quiet cafe far from the glare of the media, Camilla met with Sarah, Leo, and Lily. The awkwardness was still there, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of kinship. "He called us," Lily said, stirring her hot chocolate. "Once?" He tried to apologize. "What did you say?" Camilla asked gently. Leo looked up, his blue eyes, so like his father's but so much kinder met hers. "I told him we didn't need an apology. We needed a father, and it was about 17 years too late for that. We wished him well and hung up." The finality of it was both sad and freeing. Camilla reached across the table and put her hand over Sarah's. "We're going to be okay," she said, a statement of fact, not hope. Sarah squeezed her hand back, a smile finally reaching her eyes. "I know." Camilla looked at these two teenagers, her daughter's half-siblings, and at the strong woman who had raised them. They were not the family she had ever imagined, but they were family nonetheless, forged in the fires of one man's lies. Out of the ashes of the Park Empire, a new legacy was just beginning. One built not on wealth or power, but on resilience. Truth and the unexpected bonds between the women he had tried and failed to break. And so the story of Jeremy Park serves as a powerful reminder that truth has a way of rising to the surface no matter how deeply it's buried. It's a story about how the arrogance of power is no match for the courage of those who have been wronged. The mistress's smirk in the courtroom was not the sign of a victory, but the prelude to a spectacular downfall orchestrated by the very women he underestimated. Camilla, Sarah, and even Brooke, in her own act of self-preservation and revenge, showed that when pushed to the brink, the alliance of the scorned can topple any empire. What do you think was justice truly served? Who do you sympathize with the most in this complex web of deceit? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama, betrayal, and ultimate vindication captivated you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story of epic justice, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible stories to light. Thank you for listening.